Welcome back. All right, so last night, I was touched by someone shared a video from a live stream that Brody Brazil did, where he talked about me and the job I do, and it was really it was eye opening and just yeah. It's one of those things that I don't think about. Like every day, I stand in front of this camera and I do these videos. I don't think about who watches them. I don't think about how many people watch them. I don't think about whether NHL players might. I don't think about any of that. I just think, all right, your job is to watch the hockey games, report on the hockey games, report on the news, and post it, and that's your job. And I don't think about all that. So when I'm out and people come over and hey, I love your work, and like it's always humbling to me because it reveals that there's a lot of people that do watch these videos. Now, one question that comes up a lot, and I've had this both in person, I've seen it in the comment section, and last night, watching that video from Brody, I thought, yeah, okay, I want to talk about this because this question does come up. I don't think I've done an actual video on this. I've talked about it in videos kind of in passing. So I want to do a video where I talk about this. So there were 11 games last night in the NHL. Right, what I've done is I've taken the logos off last night's recap video, just thrown them up here, so it's all the exact same logos, and these are your matchups. And so my job is to watch these games and then report to people watching how much I watched. Now last night was frustrating because these 6 games got started and immediately there was goals everywhere. So I'm throwing goal magnets on the board. Now there are times where if there's too many goals happening at the same time, I just put the goal magnets up. I don't care who scored. I don't even pay attention to who scored because I know I can check the app later. It's going to slow down later and I can catch up. Now, that's not optimal either because there's times where I'm trying to catch up and I might miss one because something happens in a later game. I have to go over and write that note on the later game and I might miss one. That has happened before. But last night there were 6 games that started at 4 o'clock. Now, right off the bat, you have to look at the matchups. And for me at this time of year, it does make it a little bit easier because of the six, oh, look, all of them have some kind of playoff ramification. So I couldn't really not pay attention to a certain game, right? The good news was there wasn't much happening in Philly, Carolina. So when there's 6 games on, and the way I've described this before is that with my cable, I can, while I'm watching a channel, I hit the previous button, and there's 5 channels that can be loaded into the previous channels. So that means when there's 6 games on, I'm just cycling through. And that's what I do. I just, like, my wife cannot watch hockey with me because that's all I'm doing is cycling through. So let's say I go to the Dallas Buffalo game and there's play at center ice or the referees are on the headset for something. I'll write down what they're on the headset for and I will switch. So I will immediately go, let's say, to New Jersey, Washington, Islanders, Pittsburgh, and again, if there's commercials, then I'm just changing. So 4:30, the 7th game starts, and that's Edmonton, Boston. Well, that's an important game, both Eastern and Western. So I load up that game on my computer, so I have the audio going. Now, what I was doing earlier in the season was I can watch up to 4 games on my computer at the same time, but it's hard because my internet connection doesn't support that very well. So what I found was that if I went past 2 games that were just playing on the computer, it would lag, and it would lag to a point where I might be 3, 4 minutes behind the actual game, and I would stop paying much attention to the computer, and it completely defeated the purpose of having that system. So one thing, and I've always done this all the way through, is it's most important to report on goals. It's most important to report on who's playing well. So let's say Philadelphia has a really good second period. They didn't, but let's say they had a really good second period. I need to make sure that I convey that in the recap. Like so even if Carolina wins that game, I could say Philadelphia had a good second period. They had good offense here. I try to make sure I'm adding something you won't see in the highlight packages and all of that because I know the highlight packages are there. I can't compete with all that. It's just not a thing. And if I use NHL footage, then, the NHL would be both, kind of ticked off at me, but probably pretty happy if they could just take all the money, which is what happens. There's 2 things they can do. They can copyright strike, which means that my channel couldn't have live streams for 30 days and my income would be severely hampered. Or they can just say, okay, well, that's our footage And so all of the revenues generated would then just go to the National Hockey League. So essentially, then the NHL would be getting the money for the work that I've done. And while I love the NHL and everything, not that much. So at 5 o'clock, this is where things kind of help me out a little. San Jose St. Louis has no ramifications on the playoffs. So I knew I did not need to give this one as much attention as here. And also, these games are now further in. This is just starting up. And then at 6 o'clock, you've got LA and Colorado, Nashville, and Arizona. At this point, there's 10 games on. And because this one starts at 4:30, I don't get breaks. So what's nice when there aren't the 4:30 starts is that usually all of these will go to a break at the same time. I can have a bite to eat. I can, take a moment, just, rest and whatever, and just recharge. When there's a 4:30 start, I don't have that option. So I can't have that moment of, I can relax until about 7 o'clock, until that late start gets going. But what helps me again is Nashville, Arizona, not really playoff implications there because Nashville sold at the deadline and the team's playing like they did. San Jose and St. Louis, again, no playoff ramifications there. So now you're down to 7 games that I'm needing to follow a little more closely, right? And by the time you reach 6 o'clock, a couple of these games are already almost done. Philadelphia and Carolina was the fastest game. That one got done first. I think the Islanders and Pittsburgh were second. And this one was 10-4. So I didn't need to pay this one much mind at all, other than, are they punching each other yet? Because once you get into that lopsided score, you're expecting some punching. But all the punching was being done in Tampa Bay and Vegas. Because Tampa Bay is playing like they've got a chip on their shoulder right now. I think that's what happens when you add Asamont and Jeannot, but and when I see them in the middle of it, I'm like, yeah, that makes some sense. Whenever there's this scrums that go on, whenever there's brawls that go on, I always look for certain numbers. So if it's Boston, you're looking for 63. Now if it's Tampa, I'm looking for 84. All right, yep, he's there. Yep. With Dallas, it'll be, is Domi? Yep, of course. So there's that. And if there's really loud swearing during a Canucks game, I look to see where JT Miller is on the ice, because that's kind of a thing. But then as the games go through, so once I reach this start here, these 6 are done. This one's almost done. And now I'm down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is easy. I could just track the TV. That's actually easier than it is at the start of the night when you've got 6. When they schedule it this way, it's tougher. I prefer when there's like 4 o'clock starts and 2 or 3 of the 7 o'clock starts, even though that may mean my night ends up being later. And the 7:30 starts I've talked about, they're guaranteed to go to a shootout. I have no idea why that is. When we were at the Canucks game the other night against Anaheim, we're going to a shootout. I turned to Yvonne and I said, well, we are the West Coast start, so of course we're going to go to overtime. It didn't go to the shootout. I had expected a shootout, honestly, because the way that the Ducks and the Canucks were both kind of playing that prevent defense late in the game, I thought, yeah, if they play that way in overtime, we might go to a shootout. And JT Miller said no. So really, I try to make sure that I'm paying attention to the games that mean the most in the standings. I try to make sure that I'm getting all of the scoring information as accurate as possible, realizing that the goal scorers are going to change. And on a night like that, where you've got all of these games going on, yeah, there's going to be goals where the goal scorer changes. One thing that I've learned is that, if there's, let's say, the Rangers, Montreal, there's a goal, and the announcers say, well, it looks like it might have been deflected. I'm not writing down who scored the goal until about an hour later. Usually by an hour later, they'll have either updated who got the goal or whatever. Or maybe I go back to that game and they say, so they've changed the goal from, say, Matheson to Hoffman. And so I'll put that goal then up on the board and say, okay, so they've changed it and they've gone over it. I don't get into the injury side of it as much, because when you've got that many games going on, you're going to have guys getting hurt often. As of, for instance, last night, Tyler Seguin, apparently it's a knee injury with him. There's no idea of how long that's going to be. But the initial replay looked like he might have got hit with a skate. And there was some talk of there being some blood on his leg. So my first thought was that could be a skate cut. And that's why I say possible as well when I'm doing the recaps. Because when you've got that many games on, when they do that update, I may not be watching that game at the time. Now, when the channel started out and I started trying to do this, I actually went on the Discord and said, okay, so, if I had somebody watching these games and taking notes, especially when I had a job and I wasn't home to watch the games. The problem was that while those notes were well done and people would, help me out with that, that when I would do the recap video or the time reviews, and I plan to change the name again next year because why not change it up? If the notes don't come from me, I can't defend them. So let's say that there's a dirty play in the game between San Jose and St. Louis. I don't see it. But I say, you know what? There's 7 games on. I can't watch that. I'm going to get a Billy. Hey, Billy, you want to watch? Sure, okay. So Billy's going to watch this game and take notes for me. So let's just go ridiculous with it, and every second phrase in his notes is about how dirty the Sharks are, and there might be something about a high stick that wasn't called, and maybe he's wrong, and then I provide I put the video out there, and people in the comment section are saying I don't know what happened with the notes for that San Jose St. Louis game, but they're wrong. And that's not how it turned out. So that's why I don't get people to come in and help. That's why I don't have, all these extra researchers and all that, because I just know from that very tiny sample back then that the problem then becomes one. I stand here and I do the recap. I've done all the notes. If I haven't done all the notes, then I'm standing here shrugging, going, well, I don't know. So why would I be the one doing the recap video if I didn't take the notes? I probably shouldn't be the one doing the review slash recap for that game. It should be that person that took those notes because it's their notes, it's their experience watching the game. And one thing that I know from all the years I've watched sports, we don't see the game the same. So I could sit in a room with 10 other hockey fans, watch the game, and if you asked us after the game, what did you see? And if we took notes, our notes would all be completely different, and what we find important would be completely different. So for me, the important thing is who got the goals, how does the game feel, the who's controlling the game, and just that kind of thing. Who's sloppy in their own end, who's got the good forecheck going, and I try to make sure there's notes on that. At the same time, when it's the first period, I try not to fill up the board with a bunch of notes because I know there could be a bunch of goals in the second and third period, completely fill up the board and mess up the whole presentation after. Where I'm like, so I've got 15 small boards here. I know there's people who would love for me to have the small boards, and I'll pick it up here. So I do have small boards, and what I've done before is, and this happens in the playoffs when you get a game that goes into 4 or 5 overtimes, is that I run out of notes on my board and I have to use the small board. And as funny as that is and everything, I haven't had to use the small board this season. And I don't think I used it last season during the regular season either. But that would happen to me early on because I was taking way too many notes. And so I try to make sure it's the important stuff, something noteworthy, something that I thought was interesting. And like, if it's a really big hit, I try to document the fights. And I think the fights are important because no matter how you feel about fighting, whether you like it or don't like it in hockey, it can change the momentum of a game. It can fire up a team. It can make a building really loud. And if the team gets fired up off of that, it is something noteworthy, so it has to be on the board. So if I see a fight in the game, I will put it on the board. If it's not on the board, I didn't see it. I don't watch the highlight reel packages before I do the recap video because that would take a lot of time. Those recaps are usually 4 or 5 minutes each. Well, last night that would have been almost an extra hour, and it doesn't necessarily change anything because I watched the games. So, is there stuff that gets missed? Yes. I don't stress nearly as much about that as I used to. I used to be obsessed with I have to make sure I catch absolutely everything that happens in the game. And I don't feel that way now because very often people who are watching the videos, watching the recaps, watch those games as well. So I'm just, sharing how I saw it. You guys can let me know how you saw it, all that fun stuff. But it's going to be a rough little while here. Like tonight, there's 2 games. So it's my stepson's birthday, and so we're going out and doing an escape room, which takes roughly an hour. Well, it's during hockey games, but the other option was to do it on Sunday when it's much busier. Well, tonight there's only the 2 games, and so since the fam's been, nice enough to change around their schedule. Like we went to Disney during the spring break, or the All Star break. Sorry, they're going into spring break here, so that's why I got spring break on the mind. But we went to Disney because that was the All Star break. Initially, the plan was to go at the end of November, and I looked at the NHL schedule and I said, "There's no way I can't do it." So, what was supposed to be a birthday celebration for a family member in this house by taking them to Disney became okay. So we have to move that by 2 months to make it so that it's scheduled the way that it is. So I schedule holidays, I schedule things around the NHL schedule. That's why I've only been to 2 Vancouver games this year. I'm a season ticket holder in Abbotsford. I haven't been able to go to a game because when Abbotsford games are on, it's always a busy night in the National Hockey League. And as I mentioned in the recap video I did after we got back from the Anaheim Vancouver game, if I come home and there's been 10 games on, it just doesn't work. I used to go to Vancouver Canucks games when it was relatively busy, but I found that by the time I got the review video posted, it might be 1:30 in the morning, and then I still had to get up early the next morning, and it just drained me, and it was like I can't do this. So I have to make sure that if I'm going to go to a game that it's a light night and that's the end of the NHL schedule, and that's just how that works. So, at any rate, I do my best to provide as accurate of information as I can to everybody. I always make sure that when I'm doing a preview and there's a lot of games on, that I say I will watch as much as I can. The interesting thing is tomorrow there's 15 games in the National Hockey League. However, there's a number of matinee games, so it's still way easier for me to track everything than on a Thursday when there's 11 or 12 games. And next Thursday it's 11. The Thursday after that is 12. The Tuesdays are really busy as well, and of course Wednesday and Fridays really quiet in the National Hockey League. And it's going to be that way till the season's done. And the interesting thing is, and then the playoffs roll around, and I have a different board for every series. And it's easy for me to keep track of things because you don't have 15 games on. You can't. There's only 16 teams around. So the most games you could have in a night would be 8. And even then, they're not all going to be at the same time, and they never do that. They don't have all the teams playing on the same night. It's usually 4, and it's usually 2 early games and 2 late games. It's easy. So, with the set that I have now and the size of the room that I have now, I can easily have 3 or 4 boards going, and I'm fine. It's not a big deal. And then I get all the recaps done as quickly as I can, and yeah, it's honestly a fun time. So the National Hockey League, the regular season can be a bit daunting. I understand the NBA schedule is kind of the same, and if I had decided to become the baseball guy, man, like it's baseball all day, all the time. That would have been crazy. So and 162 game schedule, just trying to keep track of everything would have been virtually impossible. So I'm really glad that I got traction as the hockey guy because I did do baseball videos a bit at the start because I enjoy baseball, but yeah, the schedule's way too long. At any rate, there you go. I wanted to do this just for people who might be curious about what how I keep track of things. There are times where if a game that I'm not able to track on the computer and on the TV, if there's a weird score or something's going on, I'll load up NHL radio and I'll listen to the NHL radio on that while there's this and this going on. The problem is sometimes you can get caught up in all the cross chatter and your brain can't focus on everything at once and it just kind of turns into noise. So I have to watch that as well. Because I want to make sure that when I do the recap video at night, you guys get the information as accurately as possible from me. You get as much as possible without me going into way too much detail, which can happen. But that's just how I take notes. I can sometimes tend to take tons of notes and a lot of detail. But anyways, there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. I do thank you guys so much for all your support. Always, I always say it. It's always at the end of the video, but I mean it. It's like when we were at the Canucks game, people are coming over. When we're down at Disneyland, people coming over to say hi to me. It's great, and it's one of those things where there have been times where I might be kind of feeling half burnt out, and then I'll get an email or somebody, there's a compliment, and I'm like, wow, that really helped. Or I'll have a conversation with somebody who's a subscriber, and I'm like, man, I'll make a video for that person later because, and I'll have that person in mind when I do a news video or recap because I'm like, that person is going to watch this and it's important to them for whatever reason it is. So I always keep that in mind. Let me know your thoughts, though, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And again, all the support is much appreciated. I've always said it's very humbling, and it is. It is very, very much very humbling, and I don't think about it so much. I'm in this room every day. I do the news, I do the notes, I do the previews, the reviews. I don't really have much time to let it process how many people might be watching and which people might be watching, because then it gets kind of intimidating or weird. And so there you go. When I got a letter the other day from Steve Payne, who I did a career video on. I was recently made aware of the career video you did on me and wanted to reach out and thank you for your thorough insight and kind accolades expressed. Your understanding of the NHL in the 80s is very spot on. As you mentioned, my career was cut short by multiple injuries, but I'm very grateful for having the chance to play for the North Stars for 10 years. Keep up the good work. Sincerely, Steve Payne. I almost cried when I read that. That is just, absolutely amazing. That's one of those things. That's one of those letters that goes into a box that Yvonne has of that kind of thing, because it's weird to me because I grew up watching this. I've loved watching hockey. Before I had the channel, I was watching hockey a lot too. All right. So I just wanted to share that. I'm done for now. Thank you guys so much again. I will talk to you soon enough.